Hello, Thermic Light here again. In this video I'd like to open a dialogue about feminist credentials. Have you people out there ever noticed that feminists have something to say about everything, whether it's about history, business, politics, biology, psychoanalysis, media, dating, family structure, and much more? Imagine how arrogant someone has to be to profess a deep universal knowledge in those said subjects. Obviously, any sensible person with even the slightest amount of modesty will admit their own fallibility and restrictive depth with respect to their knowledge. Maybe you know astrophysics well, or maybe biology, but what I know you can't admit is to understand all of science. It is simply too difficult for any person to hold a firm understanding in it all, which is largely due to what little time we have to learn it. However, despite our individual limits, we can still collaborate our knowledge for a given endeavor. This is well demonstrated in our fight for health because someone who studies medicine won't know much about physics, and likewise a physicist doesn't know much about medicine. However, we get this beautifully coherent merge of scientific fields that help us fight cancer with radioactive treatment. So when feminists proclaim to have their own say on something like biology, I then have to directly call out bullshit. I guess after saying this, I should expect some feminist out there to say something akin to, "I'm a feminist and I don't think I'll say this at all." To them I say, go fuck yourself, because if that was the typical case, I then wouldn't have any issues and this particular video would have never been made. So then, why do feminists feel so confident in their conceited opinions? I'd say it has a lot to do with the very gynocentric degree that they have earned. Apparently folks, that much of the major and major subsection of degrees out there is inferior when compared to the all-powerful gender studies, a degree that has about as much substance as a midday talk show.
Listen, cars aren't designed for women. I mean, the steering wheel would have 2 dents in it. We bring our own airbags, right, girls?
Anybody like cheesecake?
That's right, people. Apparently a social rights movement deserves its very own academic field in universities. But to be fair, I bet it's very difficult to earn something like that. It is, however, such a shame that the anti-war movement, the ignorant anti-nuclear movement, and animal rights movement didn't get their very own. I guess they weren't important enough. In my last video I discussed why feminist theory is an erroneous pile of crap. Keeping this in mind, it would also be fair to say that any person of science who also adopts feminist theory within their field of study is being intellectually dishonest with themselves. Mixing feminist ideology within science and any other fields is not a positive way when seeking the truth. When seeking the truth, it is important to leave your preconceptions behind and accept the reality of evidence. That, in and of itself, is the heart of science. But what of the layman feminist? To that I say, why should we honestly care about them? We don't regard any other layman with any great seriousness, so then why should we take the opinion of someone who just happens to be a feminist? And frankly, the layman feminist is rather typical of this blogging feminist. I quote, "Categorizing and regulating people based on their genitalia or secondary sex characteristics is the work of the patriarchy." Or, "Biology is a social construct." Or how about this one? "It has been well documented that not only are scientific models masculinist, but all the fields of science tend to be men-dominated. That is, the entire field of biology has historically been a patriarchal model." And this shit comes from a proclaimed teacher. The last statement really pisses me off because it shits all over the privileges that we as a species have developed to better our lives and understanding. But what else do you honestly expect to hear from an insolent feminist that has most likely lived her entire life in Western society, living day by day and completely ignorant of the immense struggle of past and present peoples who serve her all the basic necessities for a comfortable life? At this point, I would like to present you with this conundrum. If women were so oppressed in our past, then how did they come up with this stuff? With the supposed absence of education for women, how then could they have possibly developed feminism? Are we to believe that a bunch of housewives got together and decided to exchange feelings about how shitty their lives were, and that a man's life is much better in all aspects because of their discontent? I for one would really like to learn the honest truth about that. Incidentally, the development of a theory by angry women doesn't sound like the start of something grand, especially if we are led to believe that women then were void of education and therefore ignorant. But given the progress of feminism, I'd say ignorance and fervent animosity has a lot to do with it. I'd like to leave you with a final question to ponder. If sexual objectification is considered derogatory by feminists, then why did they make the slut walk protests? Why then were the protesters dressed scantily and posed for pictures in sexually suggestive poses akin to a boxing ring girl, the very acts that feminists typically disdained when represented in the media. Truth is that feminists find it hard enough to remain consistent with their own dogma because their work is largely based upon subjectivity. I hardly feel that this was a conclusive talk about the conceited feminist and their education, although I think it does at least raise some valid points and questions. Perhaps I will go back onto this topic with more detail. There is a lesson to be learned here, and I think Carl Sagan says it best. Better by far to embrace the hard truth than a reassuring fable.